Welcome to The Art of Likeability, ranked one of the top podcasts in the world. In this podcast, you'll discover how to leverage likability to build stronger relationships, lead more efficiently, close more sales, and keep customers happy while increasing success in your professional and personal life. Let's jump in with your host, Arel Moody.
What's going on, Likeability family? Arel Moody here, your host of the Art of Likeability podcast, where you learn the most incredible strategies for absolutely crushing it in every area of your life. And listen, we have a super awesome treat because, as you know, who you surround yourself with is some of the most important aspects of creating a successful environment, a successful organization, a successful business. And I know many of you influence, are directly responsible for hiring of the people that are with your group. Now, this could be whether it's a volunteer job that you're a part of, a organization that you run, a business that you run, and there's always the mythical question, how do you hire the right person? How do you make sure you're building it? Because I remember I can't remember who the name of the coach was, but it's March Madness right now, and there was a really great basketball coach who said, they asked, how do you win so many games? How are you a great coach? And his response was, it seems like the better players I recruit, the better coach I become. So when you have a right team, everything goes well. And I'm really excited to share with you today who we're going to be interviewing, because this individual not only knows a thing or two about hiring people, she knows a thing or two about hiring people in the right way. So let me tell you a little bit about her so you can understand why I'm saying just that. So Nancy is the author of 20 publications, including How to Write Objectives That Work, with sales of over 400,000 copies, and Difficult People Made Easy, a booklet of practical tips for dealing with difficult situations. She started Vinehouse Essential Limited in 1995 as a management training and consultancy company. A few years ago, Nancy developed a recruitment process that now achieves success rates of over 80% compared to the average of about 25 to 30%. So she did this utilizing many of the skills she developed in other areas and putting them all together. So her company, Vinehouse Hiring, now specializes in recruitment and hiring for small to medium-sized owner-run businesses in the English-speaking world, including the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, and the UK, and is the only company, I want you to catch this part, offering a 1-year guarantee on its hires. So she just doesn't walk the walk, she stands behind it. Everyone, please welcome, and thank you so much for being on the show, Nancy Slessenger.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited. Now, we got to give a little bit of background, because one of the things that we got from your bio is that you kind of took these aspects of so many different areas and you brought it into the hiring. Give us a little bit of a background of what were the areas that you spent the most time in and what kind of led you to cracking this shell, if you will.
Well, I think the first thing was in one of my first jobs, I was working in a factory, and I just wondered why we had so many people there who couldn't do their jobs very well. And it struck me as, a bit silly, really. And so I got interested in how did we do that? And I then did a very simple experiment. I just asked my colleagues, they were all production managers like me, who were their best 3 people and who were their worst 3 people. Then I went to the HR department and I got out all the information about those people and when we'd hired them and the interviews, the tests we'd done and so on. And I put them into those 2 piles. And I then looked through the piles to see if there were any correlations. Well, there were. And what was really horrifying was that a lot of the people we thought were going to be really fantastic actually turned out to be in that pile of the not very good people. And a lot of the people who'd only just scraped through our process turned out to be some of our best performers by a long way. So as you can imagine, that got me quite interested in what was really going on there. And it turned out that some of the things we were doing, we thought we were doing well, but actually we were just getting it completely wrong. So, for instance, a very simple thing was that on a production line, you actually want people who are quiet and who don't want to talk a lot to other people, who don't go around disturbing everyone else and just get on with their work. But I'm sure you can imagine how those people come across in an interview. They're the sort of shy, nervous people. Whereas the people, and no offense, Errol, but, like you and I in an interview, I'm sure we're just great. Everyone loves us. But you probably wouldn't be great on a production line, would you?
I think I would be the worst production line employee possible.
I think you would, because you like talking to people and you're great fun and, you're really interested in people and stuff and you're sort of out there. And that's not what you want on the production line. So we were recruiting people who thought were great, really good fun and would fit into the team. And actually all they did was get bored and disrupt everyone else doing their work. I mean, it's obvious when you point it out, isn't it? But
right. It makes a lot of sense because you're hiring to the position. You want to fill the best candidate. And it doesn't always mean there's this archetype of a personality that exists. It really depends on what we're getting ourselves into.
Exactly. So you have to really work out what works well in the job. Now, I did a degree in physics, and in physics, you sort of examine all the evidence, you kind of postulate a theory and then you test it out and you do experiments and so on. So I really approached it in very much the same way. And the other thing I'm really keen on and have been for years, and this is going to sound very familiar if you listen to the wonderful Perry Marshall interview that you did not that long ago, is the 80-20 rule. Now, to me, when you're recruiting people, you need to be focusing on that 20 or even, as Perry was saying, that very small 1% of the people who are the ones you actually want. So to me, hiring and recruiting is very similar to marketing. It's a process of elimination, and you're just trying to find those absolutely right people. And so one of the other things that I did was designed a process where you eliminate the people who just aren't right for the role very, very early on so that you can focus your attention on that 20%, then reduce that down and down and down till you've just got that one person that you're looking for. So I took that along with the work that I've done on objectives and really being clear about what you're trying to achieve and specifying things very clearly and put all that together into my process.
Now, when you said you would go and talk to the top people, like you say, okay, you hired people in the last year. Who are the best people? Who are the worst people? I'm just curious. Do you find that most people do that? Or it seems like a very powerful step, but I tend to find the most powerful steps are not done. So do you just feel like most people aren't even doing that little step there within their own orgs?
Do you know that's really perceptive? Most people have loads of very useful information about what they could be doing better. And, having listened to quite a lot of your work, the information is all over the place, isn't it? But most people aren't looking at it or using it. So, yeah, people just aren't doing that. No one had done what I did at that stage and asked that question. And the same thing later on when we hired someone who my boss told us was going to be absolutely fantastic. He'd done all the tests better than anyone they'd ever had. And he was a complete disaster when he joined. Absolute unmitigated disaster. Now, to be fair, even if you've got the best hiring or recruitment process in the world, it's still possible to make a mistake. That does happen. There were things like, one guy we hired who was absolutely great for 3 months, and then his medication was giving him really bad side effects, so he had to change it, and then he couldn't focus. So what had been a good hire turned out not to be a good hire. Those things are always going to happen.
Right. But there's no perfect scenario, right?
No, I mean, we're working towards it, but no, I don't think there is a total perfect one. So you always have to review what you've done and say, well, this hasn't gone right. What's actually wrong? Go back to the process. How could we have filtered this out before? Or at the very least, do something about it really quickly. And nobody went back to the process to see what had gone wrong.
Right, and that's a big, big takeaway. I remember when I was first getting started in my entrepreneurship career, and I was really interested in sales. I was reading in a sales book, and they said, every organization has a top salesperson, but no one ever really goes up to that top salesperson and says, what makes you the top sales? What are you doing that no one else is doing? And most of those people are usually willing to share. So I love this idea that you're saying, go to the people who are good and figure out like, what are their commonalities? What are their tying threads for that unique position, right?
It's funny you should say that about salespeople, because I was asked to do exactly that in the company years ago. And they had, I think, about 8 salespeople. And one of them was able to predict his sales to within 10%. The others couldn't do it to within 50. And do you know what he did?
What's that?
So simple. All he did was he went to his distributors every month and just said, "Hi, Errol, how are you doing? And what are your sales? What's your prediction for your sales over the next year?" Then he just put it into a spreadsheet, added them all up, and that was how he did it.
Right. Like a lot of times we're looking for this incredibly difficult thing where it's just the execution of simple things done well.
Yeah. And that's the hallmark of what we do in our process. Actually, it's really simple. It is a bit of work. Like a lot of the stuff you talk about, you have to put some effort in. It only works if you actually do it. But if you do it, you get some really, really good results.
Love it. Love it. So let's talk more about the process. Let's say I'm someone who I've been hiring the wrong people, or I've been, convincing myself the people I hired are 10s when in reality they're like 6s, and I'm struggling with it. And I want to kind of learn from the process that Vinehouse hiring has mastered. Where would you recommend starting?
Right. Well, the first thing is, if you have got a few people, it may be that you've got 1 or 2 who are actually good. Whether, you did it on purpose or you got them by chance, you've got a couple of people who are good. The first thing to do is to look at those people and what they were like when they actually joined you. Not what they're like now, but what they were like when you hired them. And what's the difference between them and the people who you wouldn't really want to get back again. Now, quite often, you'll find they don't actually have all the qualifications. They might not be kind of the sharpest knives in the drawer, but there's something about them that distinguishes them. Now, it may be the way they behave, it may be an experience they've got, it may be their approach to things, but there will be some different things about those people. Now, what you then do is, in our role, we create what we call a person specification that specifies that person really, really clearly. And I'm not talking about just qualifications and experience. They're kind of pretty basic. What I'm talking about is what are the actual skills that person has? So what are they able to do? Can they walk into any situation, just sell anyone anything? Or if they're in a difficult situation with someone who's not happy with the service, are they able somehow to negotiate it and leave that customer happy? Are they always able to find a really good deal from a supplier? What is it that they're able to do that the other people can't do? The next thing is to look at how do they behave? What kind of behaviors do they have? Are they, say, very good at questioning? Are they very good at listening to people? Are they very good at analyzing spreadsheets? What is it? What are those skills? Do they have that very analytical step-by-step approach? Or are they kind of a real ideas person who can always think of an idea in any situation? And list all those things out so that you've got a really clear description so that anyone who saw that would go, "Hey, that's my friend John." Or they go, "That's me." Yeah. So it's really clear. Now, the other thing I would include there is the values. So values are what drives your behavior. So, we achieve things and we do them in certain ways, but the way we do them depends on what our values are. And there's a little example that I normally use. So imagine you have a funeral parlour and you want to, say, double your business. Now, there's quite a few ways you could do that. You could perhaps buy another funeral parlour. That would be fine. You could be really nice to everyone who comes to the funerals and give them your card and send them notes and so on. Or you could just arrange for a lot of untimely deaths in your area, what I'd call this sort of Clint Eastwood approach. But I'm a great Clint Eastwood fan. But the way you do it depends on your values. Now, the thing is, if you hire someone who shares your values, then when you're not there, they will do things in a way that you would like them to do them. If you hire someone who doesn't share your values, they may well do things in a way that you're not going to be happy about when you get back. So in my view, I would go for values over skills any time, because a person with the right values will probably learn the skills. A person with the right skills but the wrong values could do a lot of damage.
Now, here's a question about values, because I so much agree with the concept of aligning values and also from an organizational perspective, stating those values.
Yeah.
The question I have is values at face value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, oh, yes.
I think many people would say, yeah, that's me. Like if I say we want someone who's honest, hardworking, dedicated,
yes.
like most people go, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do you really share values in a way that makes people have a clear distinction that this is for or not for them?
Right, and that is such a great question. And yes, most people have quite bland descriptions of values. Now, we can all behave well when things are easy, can't we? You know, when we've got lots of money in our pocket and someone needs, $5 or a five or whatever, it's easy to lend them. But when you're really struggling yourself and there's a difficult situation, it's a bit different, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So the thing is to think about what are the really tricky situations that people are going to be in, and how do you want people to behave in those situations? Now, you, I'm sure, have your own personal set of values, and I have a feeling they're not unsimilar to my own. And we know when someone's brushed up against our values because we kind of feel annoyed about something, or we just feel angry that that's not the way to do something. So the first thing is to sort of go back in your mind and think, well, when was the last time I wasn't happy with the way someone did something at work, or I felt angry or annoyed, or just felt that is not right? Perhaps someone claimed a taxi twice when they should have just claimed it once and didn't sort of do anything about it, or added a few miles onto their mileage claim, or put the phone down on a customer, or something that you thought, that is not how we do things here. And what you then do is you find out what that candidate would do in that specific situation. And what you do is you don't ask them, well, what would you do if a client was rude? Oh, well, I'd listen to them and I'd just be really nice. And because we'd all say that, wouldn't we?
Right.
What you do instead is you ask them if they have dealt with a situation like that, and then ask them what they did, and then ask them why they did it, because the why they did it is the value thing. So, for example, I was working with a client years ago now, and he has very, very strong values. And so we asked the candidate about, had she been in sort of a difficult situation where they weren't able to deliver to a client? And, that happens every now and then, doesn't it? Your best effort, something goes wrong. And so she kind of explained what she did. And I said, well, why did you do it that way? And her answer was, well, the client's never going to know. Well, my client was really horrified. So the next candidate, we asked the same thing, and the candidate looked quite horrified and said, well, once you've promised something to a client, you have to deliver. And that was exactly what he wanted to hear, because that is the kind of business. He actually stayed up all night once to deliver something to me that one of his people had messed up.
And you know what? I love the formatting of the way you question it, because I've heard 1,000 times, what would you do in this situation? But the follow-up for the why, to really get to what's making this person tick, what's really driving them, is
and never
awesome.
Ask them, what would you do? That you need to ask them, what did you do in this situation? Because what would you do? We'll all say, oh, well, I would be wonderful. But you need to say, what did you do? And then you've got to really investigate. I mean, we had a guy once who said he'd used a particular kind of software. He was a project manager. Oh, yes, I've definitely used that software. And I said, well, what did you use it for? Well, how did you use it? And the more we asked, the more it became obvious he just hadn't done it.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's the difference.
Got it. All right. So now I'm sitting down, right? And I'm looking at the folks who are high achievers. I'm understanding what they have in common and what works well in my positions. I'm learning how to clarify the values we care about and how to ask questions so that we can pull out the values of our candidates by asking them those circumstantial situations. What did they do? And then why did they do it? What comes next?
Well, I'm going to jump to before that, actually, because what we're talking about now is what a lot of people think of as the hiring process, which is really the final interview. But let's apply that 80-20, which is what we do here, so that you don't have to interview lots of people at the final stage. Really, in our process, you interview sometimes just one. Sometimes it could just be 2 or 3 because you filter the others out early on. So here's the real secret that's going to change the whole way you do things and save you masses of time. When you've identified all those things that you need, what you then do is you identify questions that you can ask them, and you also identify tasks that people could do that would show you that they've got those skills or behaviors or that specific experience. And then what you do is you allocate some of those to the application form, some of them to a telephone interview, and some to the final interview, just depending on where they're best suited. Now, to me, what you want to do really is eliminate at least 80% of your candidates at the application form stage. So what you do is you put those questions onto your application form. There might be some, like, have you ever dealt with this situation? What did you do? All sorts of things like that. Probably about 10 questions, all based on the job. Now, guess what happens when a lot of your applicants come to the application form?
They don't fill it out properly or not at all?
Right. Absolutely right. Because the questions that they can't answer.
Got it. So you're not just saying submit a resume and cover letter. You're saying answer these questions. Yeah. And we're saying quite clearly, these are questions based on the job. So if you like these and enjoy answering them, this could be the job for you. But if you don't like these and you can't answer them, this is not the job for you. It's probably not going to suit you. So what we're doing is we're saving them all the time of applying and all that stuff and going for an interview. And we're saving ourselves the time of looking through all those resumes. Yeah, I love that. And I remember when I was talking with Perry Marshall, he mentioned he's a big fan of like putting things up front because it's like you don't want to like bring in like 60,000 people just to get to 3. Like I want to bring in 4 and get to 3 at most, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's what this does. We have a lot of people who just don't even fill in the forms. Sometimes 80% of them don't fill in the forms. And we were just working recently, hiring some people for Warehouse. And they, I think they just had a small number of applicants. We rewrote the advertisement completely, got loads of applicants. Probably 75% didn't fill in the form. And out of the people who did, I think we had almost 100, and only 10% of them got through to the next stage.
It's interesting. I remember, and it's clicking to me now, a personal situation. A friend of mine who's a very successful entrepreneur, he tells me, when I put out like a job ad, one of the things he says, and it's really simple, but it blows his mind, is that he says, in the email subject, put this phrase, right? Like, applying for awesome opportunity, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, you'll be surprised at how many people don't put in the subject line the exact phrase I told them to put in. He's like, and if they don't, they're gone, like immediately.
Yeah, absolutely right. Really sensible. I mean, it depends. Well, you see, the thing is, it depends what personality you're looking for. And if the personality you're looking for is someone who you need to be able to follow procedures or sensible instructions, or is that kind of person, then you're right to delete all those people. If, on the other hand, you're not looking for someone like that, you're looking for someone who thinks outside of the box, then it may be you want to get rid of all the people who did put that in the subject title and not the others, if you see what I mean. So it really, really depends on what you're looking for.
So if you can give any advice on creating the architecture, if you will, of the questions that one might ask on the application, what kind of advice would you give on constructing the questions that are going to be most important to put into that application?
Well, what I would do is have questions that in total take no more than half an hour to answer, unless it's a really senior role. I mean, probably 15 minutes for a very junior role. And you want to be just asking things about what they'd be doing in the job or what they have done in previous similar jobs. So one, we've done recently is a warehouse one. So I think that's probably something lots of people are familiar with. And one of the things about warehouse people is a good one is very tidy. They're the kind of person who puts things away as soon as they've finished using them. They can't walk past, a cardboard box without throwing it away, litter, and that they just throw stuff away. They keep things really tidy. So one simple question we have on the form for them is, how do you keep your house tidy? And what we're looking for is a list of, well, on a Monday I do this, and I do this. I always put everything away as soon as I finish with it, that kind of thing. And that distinguishes people quite nicely. Another thing in that situation is they need to have some basic kind of maths. So we say, okay, someone's ordered this many, 325 units, and with boxes, the boxes come in boxes of 60. So how many boxes do we need? A really, not terribly complicated piece of math, but just something that tests whether they can do it. Another one, let's say people need to be able to use an Excel spreadsheet, would be to say, here are some figures, and you sort of give them various figures of, say, sales or whatever it is you've got there, and ask them to put them into a graph and send the spreadsheet to you. I can tell you not many people are able to do that. It's just so worrying when you see that hardly anyone can actually get a sensible graph together and put it in, put the figures in so they get a graph. But it's really specific things. I mean, another very simple one is if you're looking for, say, a customer service person who's going to have to answer emails, you give them a couple of actual emails that have come from your customers, give them the technical bits of the answer, and ask them to draft out an email or response.
Got it. Love it. So you're really going into getting a sense of what are the indicators that someone is going to have the qualities that you're looking for. So there's a lot of behind the scenes process here then.
Yes, there is. And the clearer you can define what you need them to be able to do, the easier this is. Because once you've defined all those things, you then just go down your list and say, oh, well, how would I know they could create graphs in an Excel spreadsheet? Oh, pretty simple. I'll give them some figures and ask them to do it.
And do you have any advice for someone who might be, hey, we're a brand new company, or I just got some VC funding, or I just, am making my first hire after being a solopreneur for, X amount of years. And maybe that knowledge from past experiences of what does make a good candidate doesn't really exist because it's not there yet. What's some good ways to approach it if I'm in those shoes?
And that is a much more difficult one. You're quite right there. The first thing is, do you know someone else who's got a good person who does this? Because if you do, very often they're quite happy for you just to talk to that person and find out what they like. And most of us have enough connections to do that. If not, then you need to sit down and work out exactly what the things you want that person to do are. Now, what I would often suggest people do is just search on Google for, say, if you're looking for a VA, a virtual assistant, for instance, just search for virtual assistant job description. And that will give you quite a lot of ideas, because quite often in that position, there are things you just haven't thought of that actually would be quite good for a person to do, because you just haven't been out in that area. You're just not familiar with what people can do. But you can also, as you're going, if you're working with someone who's going to, I'm assuming really they're going to take on a lot of the things you've been doing, aren't they, in this role? So what I would do is over, a week or two, just as I'm doing my work, start drawing up a list of the things that I'm thinking, actually, I don't really like doing this, or this is taking me a lot of time, and just get them into a list as I'm doing them and be really specific about what they are. Because then all you're going to need to do is get that together as your job description and then use little examples of those on your application form. And one thing we haven't talked about yet is the job description and advertisement, of course, and those are really, really important. One of the things about the advertisement that people often don't realize is, Perry Marshall will say this with, all his stuff, is the ideal number of people to apply is the one perfect candidate you're looking for. You don't really want hundreds of inappropriate people. So with your advertisement, it needs to be as targeted and as focused as Google ads and those sorts of things. So in the advertisements that we design, we put a lot of stuff in about this is what you're going to spend your time doing. This is the kind of person you are. This is what it's like working here, and so on. And that really helps people to think, oh yeah, I would like that.
And it's interesting because there's almost a natural anxiety to say, well, I don't want to be too specific because then I'm
Yeah,
gonna, what if I get nobody that applies?
yeah,
How do you
yeah.
get over that, either anxiety or what if you put something out and 0 people apply and you go, oh, it's because I was too specific. I knew it. What would you say to that person?
Right. Well, one of the steps in our process is we do a lot of research on, once we've done our person specification, we do some research into, well, does this person actually exist? Now, if you're looking for someone who's working remotely, and quite often, obviously with virtual assistants and perhaps the worlds that we live in, a lot of this stuff is remote now, it's going to be a lot easier to find someone. If you're looking for someone local to where you are, then it may be more difficult. So, for instance, we're hiring at the moment a salesperson in a particular, very sort of niche area. And it turns out a couple of big corporates are hiring for a very similar role as well at the same time. Now, that is going to make it more difficult for a small company to get their person because the big companies are sort of in there with great big flashy advertisements and all sorts of extra benefits. So the first thing is really do that research, find out what you're up against. There are things that you need to check, like have you got the job title right? Now, I know that's going to sound really simple and you may be absolutely sure that you've got the right job title, but believe me, it's just not that simple. It's really worth checking and looking on the job site, say Indeed, and all the other places you can look at to see what other jobs with the same title look like. And quite often, you have not got the wrong job title. If the job title is wrong, you are hardly going to get any applicants because people will be searching, but they'll be searching for the right job title, the one that they think is the right one. So that could be one problem. Another one is the package. You've got to have a package that will attract and retain the people you're looking for. And in the package, it's also the working conditions. So, for example, this warehouse one I was talking about earlier, where the clients were hardly getting any candidates, we rewrote the advertisement completely. And one of the things we do when we're working with a client, and this is a really simple tip, is ask the people you've already got working for you, why do you like working here? Well, it turns out that the people in their warehouse really like working there because they can listen to their own music while they're doing their work. Now, our client was completely unaware that this was such a popular benefit. So what we did was we actually put that as a headline in the advertisement saying, listen to your own music while you work in our warehouse. And that's, I think, why we got so many candidates, because we put that, because that is a massive benefit. If you spend 8 hours a day picking orders, being able to listen to your music, fantastic, compared to not being able to listen to your own music. So it could be a lot of different things. It could be the title, the package, the sort of benefits involved in the job, the working conditions, all sorts of different things. So you really need to do your research. I think that's the answer to that one.
Yeah, that's so good because there was an idea I learned from another very popular marketer who I'm sure you're familiar with, Dan Kennedy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and Dan has this thing called dog whistle language. Like when you can say the language that someone gets, that's almost like the conversation already in their head, and bring it out, it makes them go, oh, this is what I'm looking for. And it takes talking to people. We can never, ever, ever assume we know. So I love that step is there to talk to the people about what they like. And it's often missed, I'm sure.
Well, it's absolutely vital. And one of the silly things about it is it's so easy and it's completely free.
Exactly. So let's say we have retooled our advertisement or advertisement, as our friends in the UK might say.
Yeah.
And we've gotten a few candidates that come in that are ideal, 5, 4, whatever it might be. But we only got one, right? We only can hire one, but the other 4 are really good. So you got to kind of have that almost uncomfortable, I got to let them go. I got to let them down, if you will.
Yeah.
What advice would you give on I got to let you know you didn't get the position, even though you're actually pretty qualified?
Well, to me, this is really important. And it goes back to what you said right at the beginning about doing things in a really honest and nice, straightforward way. And to me, you should always be able to explain honestly and openly exactly why someone did or did not get the job. And the way to do that goes back to the person specification we talked about earlier, where we're really clear about exactly what we're looking for. Now, then what you're able to do is when someone says, well, hey, can you give me some feedback? Why didn't I get the job? You can say, well, we were looking for someone who does these things. We asked these questions, and on question 3, this was the question, this was what we were looking for, and here was your answer. And so we can just...
Do you ever feel like sometimes, what you really want to say is, we just like the other person more. They seem like nicer than you.
No.
Like, how do you handle that? If it's like they just felt like a better fit. Like sometimes there's that untangible quality about someone.
Yeah, we don't do that. So for me, if we've had clients before who've liked what I think is the poorer candidate more than the better candidate. And we just go through every single criterion with them and help them to realize that this candidate does not have these skills, made these mistakes, has this particular trait. Because one of the key things is, and I think this is a really important point, it goes slightly against liking everyone. Sometimes the best person for the job isn't the one you like immediately. And I remember years ago when I was working at a university, and the dean there had an assistant, and he was supposed to rotate that assistant every year. And he'd have the same guy for 3 years, and he really needed to take someone else. He didn't want to lose the guy he'd got. And in the end, he said, well, I'm going to have to change, and who should I recruit into this post? And I said, well, I think it should be Keith, because he has all the skills. We looked at it really closely. He said, oh, yes, but I don't really like him. And I said, well, what is it you don't like about him? And it turned out he didn't like the fact that Keith never had a list, whereas his current guy always had a list that he ticked things off. So he went back and had an interview, and he asked Keith about why he didn't have a list. And it turned out he didn't have a list because he was so efficient. He just never had anything that was waiting longer than a few minutes to do it. He was just unbelievably efficient. Well, he hired the guy, and I met him in the corridor, this chap Keith, and he said, oh, you're never going to believe this, but I've just been offered the assistant job. I can't believe how that happened. I said, oh, well, that's great. I'm really pleased to hear that. Good. I hope you're going to like it. He said, but he doesn't like me. I said, well, that's not why we're hiring, is it? We're hiring for the skills. Anyway, a year later, when my client retired, the person who gave the speech at his retirement do was this guy, Keith. And in his speech, he said, when I got this job, I was astonished because I thought Brian didn't like me, and I didn't really like him either. But we have become such good friends, and I'm really, really glad I got this job. And Brian said exactly the same, that they had really got to know each other, they'd understood each other, they'd learned to really respect each other. And of course, it turned out Keith was way better than the previous guy because he was much better suited to the job. It was just, sometimes we have prejudices that we're just not aware of. And, we're used to a comfortable old pair of shoes, aren't we, that we think are fine. And actually, there are better things around. So when clients are trying to do that, we just go through really carefully exactly what it is, what the issues are. And we had one who liked someone because they were very forthright. Well, of course, this woman turned out to be an awful bully. And the client did take her against our advice, and it was a complete nightmare, absolutely awful. And she upset people, other people left as a result, and, some bad things can happen if you're not careful.
So let me ask you this, because I'm very curious about that specific situation, and obviously without giving away anything that would compromise, integrity. What was it about the person who you thought would be the right hire, who turned out to be the right hire, that differentiated them from the person who originally your client liked but wasn't going to be the best fit? What was it about that person that stood out in your memory?
Oh, so what, in the bully example or the other one?
The one about the list. The
list. Oh, yeah. Well, it was, that guy was clearly much better organized. He got stuff done. He never kept anyone waiting for anything. He was just really well organized. Whereas the other guy was always shuffling lots of papers. And, you'd have to wait for quite some time before you got things, but just wasn't very efficient. He was a nice enough chap, but he wasn't efficient. And that was what was required in that role. You needed someone who got stuff done, come hell or high water, really.
Got it. Great. So, I know a lot of folks are getting a ridiculous amount from this, and I can't thank you enough from what we're getting. And there's always a process of, I kind of like to step by step or have something I can read or something I can come back to. And I hope people come back and listen to this podcast. It was really good. But I know that you're really putting together something really cool. It's a web-based tool to help folks really make sure that nothing's left to chance. Could you tell me a little bit about that for those who are like, this is good, but I don't want to mess anything up?
Yeah, well, what it is, it's a web-based tool, and it just takes you through each step of the process, and right from the beginning, right through to the end. Now, I will warn you, you do have to do a bit of work. You do have to do your preparation, and you do have to, work on stuff and write your advertisement carefully. But if you follow through the process, it's not that difficult. And we've got loads of examples, and some of them you can almost copy and paste and just, put your own details in and so on. Shows you how to design your questions. You can download an example of the person specification that's all filled in for another job, so you can see how that works. Shows you how to do your application form. And if you are stuck on anything, part of the membership is you can just contact us, and we will, if you can't come up with the right question or the right task, or you don't know how to do a telephone interview or whatever, we will respond and we will help you. And, we'll even do you some questions and so on if you're stuck and you can't find the questions you need. So what I'm hoping is that will really help people just to do this so much better and so much more easily. And actually, it probably will take you less time, because what you won't be doing is interviewing lots of unsuitable candidates, and you won't be wading through lots and lots of resumes. You won't be spending hours on trying to write your job description and advertisement, because we'll just take you through some steps so that you can do that really easily and quickly. So that's what it's there for, to really help you just go through the whole process and get the person you need, and be much more comfortable that they probably will be the right person.
Awesome. And I love it. And, if folks want to, get more of what you're doing just in a general sense too, tell us about what websites and social media sites are the best for us to go to for that.
Well, our website is Vinehouse Hiring, which is VineHousehIring.com. And on there, you'll find quite a lot of free material. You'll find links to our product as soon as that's ready, which it probably will be in the next couple of days, and all sorts of other stuff. There's blogs and things with information on and advice and tips in there. So, yeah, lots of stuff that should help you. And you can sign up to my emails, which I send out every now and then. I don't inundate people, but I send them out with examples of things to do and new ideas and so on how to hire and do things in a way that's easy and straightforward.
Beautiful. Love it. So I think that online, literally, I'm someone personally, I just love being able to look at something step by step, go through it, know I'm doing it right, know I'm doing it wrong. I love templates because I'm not a reinvent the wheel kind of guy. So I think it's awesome, especially if you think about it, what's the ROI on hiring the right person? What's the mental sanity, the financial benefit of getting the right person in the role that, increases revenue, decreases costs, increases efficiency. So it's one of the most important things I think businesses and organizations can do.
I think people quite often don't realize the difference between hiring someone who's just sort of average and hiring someone who's really good. And that can really impact on your revenue, and it's cumulative, of course. So worth thinking about.
Absolutely. All right. So if you can give us one more golden nugget, or one more, hey, this is one of the reasons why we at our company, Vinehouse Hiring, can guarantee a successful hire for 80% compared to 25% of others. what else would you recommend folks focus on that might fall into the category of things that people don't know that they don't know? So it's not even on their radar. It's not even something they think about, but you're like, man, this right here, this really increases your success. But most people, they're not even thinking about it.
Okay. Well, one very simple thing that a lot of people don't think about is to do a telephone interview before you do your final interview. I know it adds a separate stage, but if you give a person a number to ring at a certain time, first of all, you'll find out, well, can they ring you on time? And that's very important for in lots of jobs. Secondly, one thing many people don't know is in the jury system here in the UK, it used to be illegal to be on a jury if you were blind, because people thought that blind people wouldn't be able to tell if people were lying, witnesses were lying, because they couldn't see the witnesses. Well, when they actually researched this, it turns out people who are blind are better at telling whether someone's lying or not, because they're not distracted by all the hand movements and the gestures and so on and the body language. So we do a telephone interview, and that is one of the reasons, because you can actually tell a lot more from a telephone interview than a face-to-face interview about whether a person's telling the truth or lying. So I would absolutely recommend to put that in as part of your process.
Any lie detector skill sets that you've picked up? Is it a certain uncomfortable, like sometimes I find it difficult to tell, is someone lying or are they just socially uncomfortable or awkward in a general sense?
Right.
Any feedback there?
Yeah, well, with lying, people tend to be much more general in their answers, and they tend not to use I, me in there. They'll just say, oh, well, this happened, or they did this, or whatever. A person who's telling the truth is generally able to be much more detailed and specific about what actually they did and happened, and they'll talk about, I did this and then I did this. Like the guy who hadn't used the software. As soon as I started asking for details, he just couldn't give them because he didn't know. He hadn't done it.
That's actually that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it's really good because you could be like, oh yeah, totally. I love, I'm really proficient at Excel. It's an amazing software. You're like, oh, great. So you feel very comfortable. Oh, very comfortable. Oh, what would you do in this situation? I have no idea what I would do, right?
Yeah, tell me about the last graph you produced. How did you do it? What problems did you encounter? What happened? What did you do then? How did you get it into colors?
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Of sense.
It's and on our website, in our tool, we've got a whole list of, here are the sorts of questions you need to follow up with that will give you that kind of information.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, listen, I can't tell you, Nancy, this has been just an incredible experience. I feel like we are learning so much about choosing the right people, the work we do beforehand, the way we quantify what makes a good candidate, qualify the values that are important to us, the questions we ask to make sure we have the right values and we pull it out of the person. We're doing the right description of the job advertisement. We're doing a right title. We're making sure we know how to bring it down and narrow it down to the best few candidates versus a bunch of them, what kind of eliminators we put in the questions in the application. We talked about just incredible ways to ask questions to pull out if someone's telling the truth or not telling the truth, how to make sure we're picking the right candidate, whether we think, our gut is selling it, but what are we looking at from our specific needs point of view? I mean, just an incredible waterfall of clearly what you're doing with your physics background and all that other stuff you put in. It's just incredible. Nancy, thank you so much for being so open, for letting us know. And, one last time, let folks know in case they were driving or not paying attention when you said because they were so enraptured. Tell us again, where can we go find you and where can we learn more about that product you have coming out?
Right, so it's Vinehouse Hiring, VinehousEhiring.com. And it's all there on the website. So I'm Nancy Slessenger, and it's, you can even search for me, you'll probably find it. But VineHouseHiring.com is the place to go and find basically our role is to find people who will love working for you, that you'll love working with and will do a great job. That's what we're here to do.
Awesome. Now, I got to ask, what's the word Vinehouse mean?
Oh, it was a complete accident. I went to a conference and someone put it on my name badge because it's the name of my house. And even though we spent 3 days trying to think of another name for our company, everyone just liked Vinehouse. So that's why it's called Vinehouse. No one ever asks that. But that's how it happened.
Well, I'm glad we got the insider scoop right here in the Art of Likability
Yeah, you
podcast.
did. You absolute scoop. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And as we say in every podcast, the information that Nancy shared with you today is not going to do anything to help you. The application of this information will absolutely change your life. So I encourage all of you listening, regardless of what position you're in, regardless of where you are, ask yourself, what's the one thing that you're going to take from this and start applying immediately? What's the one step, the little hinge, if you will, that's going to swing a big door that the next time you're in a situation, it's going to be your go-to improvement. When we improve step by step, little by little, that's how we see incredible results. That's how we build the right environment. That's how we have more success and build better relationships. And if you don't want more success and better relationships, you're listening to the wrong podcast. Because that's what we do here at the Art of Likability. Nancy, again, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. You are awesome.
So are you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast, The Art of Likability, and reach out with any questions you have. Until next time, remember, my friend, you are awesome.